All right, seeing it is 7 o'clock, I would like to call the February 15th, 2024 business meeting of the Board of Education to order. If we could stand and start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to invite our student representatives to lead our land acknowledgement.
The West Irondequoit Central School District acknowledges the indigenous people of this region, and that this school district building sits on the homeland of the Onondaga of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is on these lands that we teach, learn, and live.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight, Dr. Johnson?
No, they're not.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Ms. Porter, seconded by Mr. Salt. All those in favor? That is 7-0. Ms. Lustig.
Sorry.
Okay. Next is public comment. We don't have anyone signed in for public comment tonight, but we do welcome public comment at all of our business meetings. We're here every other Thursday. Next is the approval of the minutes. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the minutes of the January 18th, 2024 meeting, the January 25th, 2024 workshop, and the February 1st, 2024 study session be approved as presented.
May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mrs. Porter. May I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Porter. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? That is 7-0. Next is the good news. Take it away, friends.
More than half of the 70 IHS seniors trying to earn the seat of civic readiness from the State of Education Department gave their presentations in late January. This is a formal recognition that a student has attained a high level of proficiency in terms of civic knowledge, civic skills, civic mindset, and civic experiences. 2 kindergarten classes, a 3rd grade class, and a counseling group at Brookfield wrote about 130 cards with well wishes to nurses at Galasanjo Children's Hospital. This aligned with the monthly kindergarten Peter theme being post office. Hospital Community Outreach Director Jennifer Johnson said visiting with students while picking up the cards was the best part of her day. Congratulations to 5 IHS students that earned spots in the Senior High All-County Music Festival in March. For band, it's junior
Turkino and Bergia.
Thank you. Senior Marin Penner and sophomore Kaylee Shipman. For chorus, it's junior Emma Jane Shalom and freshman Jace Roberts. 11 Dake students earned spots in the Junior High All-County Festival in March. Congratulations to Stephen Weber for band and fellow 7th graders Ray Epping and Peter Ranella for orchestra. For chorus, it's Arizona Kane, Abbott Harrodson, Sullivan Hireman, Callan Maitrez, Rachel Murray, Everly Stoffel, Connor Van Scooter, and Maya Leach. They're all 8th graders. Dr. Orlando Marrero, our K-12 Director of STEAM, has been invited to present at the New York iReady Success and Innovation Leadership on March 5th and 6th. Dr. Marrero will speak specifically about our district's implementation and continued expansion of iReady mathematics at the K-6 grade levels. Nearly 50 students attended a presentation on diversity in healthcare at IHS. 4 local healthcare professionals, including the West Irondequoit Central School District Board of Education member, Mr. Justin Conner, talked about their careers and discussed the lack of diversity in their field. Congratulations to an entire district and community for raising more than $12,000 at the annual Polar Plunge, which benefits Special Olympics New York. That was the most of any local high school. Our IC Eagles team has more than 60 students participate, and that was the largest group of any organization at the Plunge.
Thank you very much. Lots of exciting things happening. Next is the report of the superintendent, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Metris. So tonight I'll start out with our guiding question for the year, which is how are all the children? And looking up here, we just heard a little bit about the Polar Plunge, so I just want to again thank everyone that participated in that. I want to also really call out Kelly Maroney, one of our teachers at the high school. She did a lot of legwork to promote that and to just really call in so many students and staff to participate in that. So without her, we definitely wouldn't have hit that target of, well, we didn't target $12,000, but we wouldn't have raised $12,000. So really appreciate her leadership as well as the high school administration leadership. I'll start at the top level up there. What you see there is, it was kind of a combination of a spirit assembly at Rogers and a dedication of the new gym floor. And it was a really cool experience. I got to stop over there for a little bit of that. And so it was great to see Nick DiMartino, the new principal over there, with all of the children together, with the staff, just kind of pumping up the crowd, making connections. We had a number of staff members, and this is kind of a customary thing. They were able, through activities in the classroom, the kids got to pie them in the face. So one student, I heard them saying, this isn't fair because they all came in with garbage bags over, goggles, and they thought that they were going to hit them in their, in their professional clothes and everything, but the teachers had a little trick up their sleeve. So that was cool. And then we had some IHS Mosaic students go over, and most of them were students that had gone through Rogers, and it was just really inspiring to watch those students make connections with that crowd of Rogers students, and just talk about like their experience through Rogers, and then some of them shared how they overcame different things. So I just thought that was just an outstanding model for those Rogers kids, and like I said, true inspiration for them. And I just want to call out Tisha Maldonado, the club advisor, because she does a lot of work to make those inroads with buildings, and for Nick DiMartino for incorporating that. Below that, speaking of IHS Mosaics, they joined forces with the Black Student Union, and they actually hosted with the Dake Mosaic students a conversation just around harmful language. And they met with the students over at Dake, and they just talked about feelings and processing, what they go through when they encounter offensive language and slurs. So again, I just think the fact that our students are just facilitating conversations about that amongst themselves. We have that connection between the high school and the junior high school. I just think that's very noteworthy, and it's worthy of praise and celebration. So I did reach out to both of those groups and invited them in for our next meeting, because we're meeting at IHS, and we're in the routine of celebrating our students for their leadership. So they'll be with us at the next meeting and receive some certificates for that. And we talked about Mr. Connor, so thank you again for organizing that and having an opportunity to listen to the questioning. Our students were just extremely engaged, and I talked with the teacher, Yvonne Buccarelli, afterwards, and and she was just celebrating the way that the students approached that. They left with a lot of excitement, and they carried that conversation over into the next day as well. So just want to say thank you. I know that's been something you've been working on for quite some time. It took a lot of effort to pull everybody together, but thank you for doing that for our students. It was also National School Counseling Week, February 5th through the 9th. So I just want to thank all of our school counselors across the district, as well as our mental health professionals, for everything that they do to support our students, to support our staff, to create plans of intervention and support, and to just be those liaisons with our families, to help students in all of the different ways that, really appreciate all that they do. So some updates from across the district. I'll start with legal counsel. So this is something we've talked about. So Harris Beach, the attorneys that serve us on the educational side, they're making a move to another firm. So we've discussed that, and what we are recommending is that we move to Fiorenza, which when we did the RFP, they were the other finalists. When we made that decision, we've met with them, we've talked with them. They're excited to come in and meet with you on the 7th of March, where we will present a recommendation to reauthorize them as their general counsel. Okay? District assets, we've been talking about our assets across the district, and the board had asked for more information around the maintenance and repair of Oakview. So I appreciate James. He was able to kind of lead the plan And then we've coordinated a site visit there on April 11th. So we'll meet there, I think we said 6:30, I have to look again, but I'll make sure that you have that time. Do you remember, James?
No.
I don't. It's on the list of presentations we sent you, and I'll make sure that we send you some reminders, okay? Also, the Monroe One BOCES Board of Education member selection process. So this kind of dates back to when we had that unexpected vacancy, and you appointed somebody for that truncated term. During that conversation, you said that we're going to make the recommendation for that, and then we'll canvass and run the process and re-interview. And so we talked about that again, and working with Jeff and Veronica, we sent out some postcards. There's a lot of information out there. I think now we have 2 people that have responded, correct, Ms. Lustig? So just to review the timetable, the deadline is on the 8th of March. Interviews will happen between the 12th and 15th, and then that group, whoever you choose to conduct those interviews, will make the recommendation to the board. It will then require a special meeting, which at your table you have kind of an overview of what to expect with this timeline, and it will require a special meeting on April 18th, because when you have to make that recommendation to the BOCES board, it's between meetings. So it will require a very short meeting for you to make that recommendation, to approve that recommendation. Okay? So if that date doesn't work for you, then we can work through the officers and we can come up with a date that does. But that's on a Thursday. Okay? Did have an opportunity to meet with the supervisor, the new town supervisor, and we talked about time for him to come in and meet you. So we coordinated that for April 11th at 6:30, so before one of our meetings. So Andre Evans will join us. He is with our Rogers students and families tonight. He's joining them for one of their activities. So I look forward to hosting that. He is also interested in touring our facilities, so we're working on that. We have a date, but I don't have that off the top of my head. So if anybody's interested in joining us for that, I can make sure that you're aware of that date. And then last, based on some conversation that we've had through meetings, we did work together, James and I, and we're going to swap out the capital outlay exclusion project for next year, and rather than having the fire suppression system over there be the secondary alternate, we're going to make that the primary focus of that project for next year. So we'll take that back through facilities planning, and then that will be incorporated into our budget plan. So if there's any more conversation to have about that, happy to host that. But those are the updates tonight. Any questions or comments?
Next is the report of the student representatives.
Students, we visited Seneca, so I'll start with that, but students mentioned that Seneca was a kind and welcoming environment where they could make friends and build relationships that lasted for all of the grades. They said that teachers were welcoming and they had all good things to say about them. The students really enjoyed Mr. McGlynn, Mr. Line, and Mrs. King, which are our music teacher, our gym teacher, and their art teacher. And they like to learn through games. Addition, subtraction, and letters were favorites for second graders. And they're all excited to learn instruments when they move into Rogers and Iroquois.
This is the IHS report. Junior class government hosted a fundraiser that sold carnations with chocolates. Sweet 16 and DSS, the women's and men's a cappella groups respectively, also raised money by selling their famous singing valentines. On February 14th, carnations were delivered to the recipients, and the a cappella group sang love songs to unsuspecting students. Jazz Choir's annual Coffee House concert on February 9th featured various solo singers and a combo from the IHS Jazz Band. Coffee House provides a unique opportunity for singers, as everyone in the group is welcome to perform a solo, regardless of experience. Between the lively tunes, coffee, raffles, and cookies, Coffee House 2024 was a night to remember. IHS students and staff alike are looking forward to the annual Adam Mill game, where Dake teachers go head-to-head with teachers from IHS in a game of basketball. The game will be played on March 8th and is in honor of IHS teacher Adam Mill, who passed away from leukemia 2 decades ago. Profits from the game are donated to the further research of leukemia and to helping those inflicted by it. Sectionals are Saturday for indoor track, and cheerleading start next week for girls, and sectionals start next week for girls and boys basketball. IHS Student Council is in the process of planning their spring semi-formal, which will be on March 15th. It will include dancing, games, music, food, and a good time for all. And this concludes the IHS report.
Thank you very much. As always, you're more than welcome to stay, but there is no obligation. And then if you choose to head home, have a great night. And thank you.
You too.
Next is the report of the treasurer, and the first item is approval of the financial statements and treasurer's report. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the January 31st, 2024 financial statements and treasurer's report be accepted as presented.
May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Vice Connie. May I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Connor. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan, anything to add on this report?
Just kind of maybe in the spirit of the budget presentation coming up, just talking about revenue. One of the sources of revenue we receive is called Star Aid. It's not necessarily a separate aid category we get from the state. What it is an offset for our taxpayers in terms of it lowers their tax bills. So we collect part of the money from the taxpayers directly to what we call the warrant. The remainder, in this case, is $5.3 million as we receive from New York State, and that's the Star Aid. And when you add the two together, that's our levy that goes out to the voters to approve the bank. So I just want to point that out. And that was received this past month.
Just on the levy, I know there's the tax warrant is the taxes collected from town district residents.
Yes.
If those taxes aren't paid, will the county make some whole at some point?
Correct.
And I don't remember the time when you
Yes. Yep. Good question. So yeah. So the warrant at some point when the town is done through their collection period, we see them on our bills. You pay by end of October. And then what happens is for any uncollected tax payments, the county takes over collection of those, and they're responsible for them. And then in the spring, usually in the March, April line, they make us whole for any of those remaining pieces. They may still have collections to engage in themselves. That's when we receive our final payment. It usually runs somewhere in the neighborhood, depending on the year, or depending on other people paying their taxes or not. And that usually runs about $1 million to $1.3 million, but it's one of the pieces we get from the county in the fall, in the spring. Essentially, they become our taxpayer collector versus the town. Great question. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. President? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? That is 7. Next is budget presentation, 2024-2025 revenue. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, sir. Before I introduce Mr. Brennan, I want to go back and note one thing. I had promised to mention the Triad students. It was in my presentation. You might have seen the picture. So just to celebrate those students and staff, they actually went to the 3rd grade instrumental music selection night. And they were able to offer themselves up so the students could see their instruments, talk to the older students. So again, if you saw that picture, my apologies that I rushed over that. When we were coordinating our reports, I want to make sure I noted that because that was new this year. It was really cool. So with that, Mr. Brennan, that was a warm welcome for you with the revenue budget.
Of course.
Take it away.
A little serenade to start off.
Yep.
Can I have the clicker, please?
Depends.
So yes, tonight is really the first of 3 kind of pieces of the budget. The first is the revenue. It's actually the shortest because it's the shortest components, but it is obviously extremely important because that's our source of funds for the next two presentations, one being the non-personnel expenditures, and then obviously the last one, which is the lion's share of our expense budget, which is deals with people. So, yes, going through and taking us through the sources of revenue for the district for this coming year. So, really, what we're going to do in the presentations, we'll talk about what are the major sources of revenue, and that includes our tax levy cap, the money we receive from our community through the tax levy is a major source of funding. Foundation aid, lots of conversation about foundation aid over the last several years. Big part of the total amount of state aid we get from the state, but there are other sources from the state. Those are what's called expense-driven aids, and then there are local sources as well. So we'll go through each of these major areas. So what's the percentage of these things? So really, 94% of our budget comes from either our local taxpayers or from state aid. And just to point out one number that's kind of jumped out at me when I was working on updating this is all the other presentations I've done around this, the tax levy is half of the total amount of revenue coming to it. And this is the first presentation where I actually dropped below 50%. And that's really because of that piece that the state has come through over the last several years of increasing foundation aid. So it's shifted the portions of our revenue from the local taxpayers to the state, which is something we've been advocating for. That being said, there are other sources as well. The largest single source remaining is really Monroe County sales tax. So when goods and services are purchased, sales tax is collected in Monroe County. Districts receive a share of that quarterly, and that's represents about 4% of our revenue budget. And then there are some other sources as well. About 2% of those include things like our pilots, rentals of our properties, refunds. I'll talk a little bit about that, but really the refunds, the lion's share of that comes from BOCES, and then any interest income, which in previous years is really much more significant with the our tax levy cap. So this is, as we know, this is a pretty complex formula overall, although really for West Veronica, it really boils down to typically 3, and this year actually 4 major contributors to it. So just kind of going to the chart on the right, one is growth factor. Growth factor really represents the total value of properties. This is independent of assessments. It's really new construction, improvements made to businesses, and so there is within each district there's an allowance for that. In our case, fully developed, that growth factor is rather small. If we were to compare our numbers on a percentage basis to, let's say, a Webster or a Rush Henrietta, which is they still are undergoing significant growth compared to us. Their growth factors are, 10, 20, 50 times larger than ours. The idea behind growth factor is as new builds, for example, are coming in, that means the district can spread the tax burden more broadly and allows an additional allowance within their tax levy. Because we don't have that, we're really limited in terms of that growth factor. Typically, it's pretty common that the inner ring suburbs, us and Brighton particularly, these are typically very low numbers for growth factor. Most of our tax levy, in terms of that cap value, really comes from inflation. That's where our allowance comes from. And we've often heard that the tax levy cap is called the 2% tax cap. And where does the 2% come from? It really comes from the idea that no, not the value is 2% for the whole thing. It's really just this one major factor. It's that inflation is capped at 2%. So if inflation's 1%, then the inflation factor in the formula is 1%. But if it's 4%, as we saw in a couple previous years, or higher, it's still capped at 2%. And we know the current CPI is greater than 2%, but that value for us is still capped at 2%. So we do have an allowance for inflation within our tax levy to increase by about $869,000. Pilot changes. Pilots are really kind of, compared to other districts, a minor part of our budget. But it is more significant for other districts who have multiple pilots. What this allows for is when pilots are increasing, or new pilots are coming on the books, what a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. And this is a factor that the Industrial Development Agency uses to encourage businesses to come into the area to improve their businesses. So when new pilots are coming on, that portion of your levy would not be as needed, so that you would have actually a decrease in it. In our case, some of our levies are coming off, some of our pilots are coming off the books, so we actually have a small allowance there. So you'll see a little bit later, when we get to other revenue sources, you'll see that there's a decrease in terms of pilots for next year projected versus current year. The last one, just although it's also a small factor in the formula, this is something that hasn't occurred in several years. It's called an ERS exclusion. Also built into the formula, we know that Western Iroquois contributes both for our retirements of certificated staff through TRS, but also non-certificated staff through the employee retirement system. And built within the formula is recognizing that there may be spikes in those on any given year. So there's a really small exclusion this year, and it's because our ERS average rate is going to be going from 13.1 to 15.2. So what they build in there is a 2% allowance. If it goes above 2%, anything above that would be an exclusion where you could possibly raise a little bit more of a levy. In our case, think about 13.1 to 15.2, that's a 0.1% allowance, which equates to $7,000, $7,600. All told, we are able to raise our tax levy by just over $900,000. That's a 2.07% increase in terms of our tax levy. These numbers have been vetted through a portal that the Office of State Controller maintains, and it has been submitted to them for their data collection purposes. Any questions on any of those factors? I know they were a little bit more nuanced than typical, but really, if you're thinking about it, for Western Iroquois year after year, it's pretty much always how inflation goes is where our levy's going to be pretty close to that. So 2% is the cap, and that's where it is right now. Just to give a little historical context, you know, the formula does vary. I mean, and every year has its own story. So if you go back to, let's go back to 13-14, where you see a really tall spike there. That year, that's when both TRS and ERS had very large exclusions. This is kind of a rebound from the Great Recession. A lot of the earnings that the state retirement systems had been making through the stock market, they weren't there at that point. That it was a 5-year average that they were making up for, and so there were some very large exclusions that year. That's what drove that to our highest levy we had since the advent of the tax cap. But you can see it varies. 16-17, inflation very low, less than 1%. And you can see this year in green, we're very near that 2% level. And like I said, the formula does vary year to year, but the kind of thing I would like to point out is just our 13-year average is 2.14%. So even though for most districts, it does change quite a bit from 2%, but for us, Western Iroquois, historically, the average has been really close year after year to that 2%, and once again this year it is. Moving on to the second largest source of aid, this is really state aid, and the single biggest piece of that is foundation aid. So just a little history on this. So foundation aid came from a lawsuit dealing with the adequacy of education for students. And so it resolved this Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit that existed. And previous to this, there were 17 different aid categories that were combined into one piece. So the disadvantage of the 17 aid categories, you had to spend the money in these different pockets. Where with foundation aid, it really is, it's really up to districts how they spend the money. Do they want to spend more in terms of in the classrooms, more in terms of on their facilities, those types of things. It is unrestricted, and so it's in the single aid category, which we call foundation aid. It's really based on enrollment, wealth, and regional cost and local effort. A couple things I want to point out here. The data used in that formula is getting really old. So 2000 census numbers are what the poverty figures in that. We know many districts, West Irondequoit included, have changed significantly in the last 24 years. So that's one piece when they are continuing to look at this formula. That would be an important thing to look at. Simply update your numbers. Second piece I'd like to point out too is the 3-year average of free reduced numbers. So one thing we had discussions about with regard to CEP, where all our students receive free lunches and free breakfasts. The concern for us, not this year, but moving forward, is really engaging in a communications campaign to encourage people to continue to fill out their free reduced lunch applications for the very least of maintaining this number for us. Now, the other side of it is on the state side, we would hope that they develop some kind of hold harmless clause, because more and more districts are taking advantage of it, because they lower the threshold for CEP to make sure that all students have access to free meals. So those are the two things I talk about, foundation and the impact on it. It's really boiled down to kind of besides all those pieces, it's really a simple formula. Obviously, there's a lot behind the scenes, but really what they do is they take how many kids you have, they set the amount based on all the information on the previous slide, your free reduced lunch applications, your 2000 census numbers, ELL students, and all that. Goes into what's called a foundation amount per pupil. That's set per district. Everybody has their own value. And then they subtract from that what they feel like based on the wealth of your district, how much should you be able to contribute locally. That's the minimum local contribution. All put together, that's where the foundation aid value comes from. One thing I'll point out to you, and this will be important in the next couple of slides, is baked into that foundation amount per pupil is the recognition that things become more expensive over time. CPI, Consumer Price Index, inflation. And in past years, that was always a snapshot of what it is this year. And in the governor's budget, she used a multi-year average to drive that value down. So that will impact in terms of her projections for her foundation. Questions on the formula, the history of it a little bit? So the governor's budget, we know that came out. Now remember, the governor's budget is not the budget. There still has to be negotiations occurring between the Assembly, the governor's office, and the Senate. That's how they operate. But this is our starting point that we work with when we start to develop our budget that we looked at in our January workshop. Important takeaway from the governor's budget, which I alluded to just previously, is that we are getting more foundation. So in 23-24, we got just over 32 million, just under 32.5 really. And this year, under Governor Hochul's budget, we're projected to get about a 1.8% increase. We were expecting, though, about $450,000 more, and that's really all tied to inflation. So the inflation we were expected that inflation increase that we were expected to receive was quite a bit lower in the governor's budget. And again, just in red there, governor's calculation uses a CPI average over multiple years rather than the current CPI, and that's different than what the formula really calls for. So important considerations there. But that is the lion's share, foundation aid of our state aid. But there are other components too. And these are what's called expense-driven aids. And by expense-driven, they're, by and large, they're controlled by how much you're spending in the current year for us, 23-24, and we receive the aid the next year. So these are all estimates based on what New York State, from pulling their data from our systems, things we supply, based on how much they think we're going to spend in BOCES for this year, and then how much aid we get back next year. Same thing with transportation, library textbook aid, computer hardware, excess costs, and building aid. Building aid's a a little more fixed because that's set to a debt service schedule, like your mortgage, you know, how much you're gonna pay each month, each year. So that is more fixed. The ones that are probably the most volatile on there, BOCES aid, and probably one of the bigger things that drive BOCES aid for us is we buy our computers through BOCES. So we set aside $700,000 to $800,000 on new devices annually, and we want them. We want to make sure they're as new as possible, right? Because we know when you get a computer, there's a built-in obsolescence, batteries get older and so on. But we want to make sure they're ready for next year. So we don't buy them in the summertime. If we bought our computers in July, we would never have them in September. So what we do is we typically purchase them in May. And so therefore, our BOCES aid number will change a bit after we make that purchase then. We supply them estimates, but until they actually get the hard data to pull in, that's a little more volatile. The other one's probably the most volatile on there is the excess and high cost aid. These are really aids we get for special ed students. So that can fluctuate quite a bit based on placements of kids, depending on the cost of the programs, and also new entrants coming into the district as well. So those are the two that could change the most, even from the governor's budget to the final approved state budget in April. And then even beyond there, those values could change when they true up our aid values over the summer. Last thing I'll just talk about, building aid, I put a couple stars by it. Just remember, building aid is dropping off this year, but that also is, that correlates and is parallel to our debt service is also being paid off. So as we have a lower mortgage on borrowings we've engaged in the past, we get less building aid back. The one that, the single source that has the most lines, local sources, it is the smallest total value. And, but we will go through each of these just briefly, just so we can look at them. So, pilots, remember we talked about this in the tax cap formula, that as pilots decrease, you actually have a little more room within your levy formula to offset the fact you're losing revenue in pilots. So our pilots' projections are decreasing for next year as some of the pilots work their way through their 10-year cycle. Sales tax, you know, it was interesting. Sales tax going into when COVID was early on, everybody was expecting the economy just to freeze up. Sales tax revenue was going to crater. It never really happened. And so our projections are kind of following a steady path going forward. We're estimating to receive about $4 million next year from Monroe County in terms of our share of it. The one that's probably jumped the most from previous year is interest. Interest is, you know, we've gone just a couple years ago to where we made $10,000 in interest to we're going to be projecting close to $1 million this year. And so this $700,000 figure is projecting that the Fed's prediction to lower the rates three times over this next calendar year. So we're going to back off a little bit from what I think we're going to get this fiscal year, but it's still quite a bit more than we projected in the previous year. Medicaid reimbursement, this is for students with disabilities who are also Medicare eligible. We get a share of money back from the federal government for those services. Day school tuition, no, we don't take tuition directly from other districts to send their kids to us. What this is really representing is foster care. So when a student is in foster care and they attend our schools, they have a district of origin on their Department of Social Services form, and we have that information and we bill those districts back. And they bill us. It's an annual cycle that all districts go through. So that would represent the estimated billing. It's been pretty steady at about $130,000. But it is an estimate because we don't necessarily know which kids we get until the year gets going. And so this represents more of a long-term average. Health services, again, we don't bill, we don't have kids coming here. They don't go visit our nurses, but what we do is we do have, for example, St. Catherine. St. Catherine has students from a variety of different districts, and so we provide health services to them, and then we bill those districts back for the students who are at that school. Rentals, you'll notice a significant decrease, about 50%, and this really represents the fact that of our two rentals, Lakeview and Oakview. Lakeview, that lease is ending this year, and we will be beginning renovations on that building for our new DOES home under the RISE project. Use facilities, these are our fees we charge different groups and organizations, these are buildings. Miscellaneous, it really is a catch-all, but the biggest piece within that is BOCES refund. So about $400,000 of that $500,000 is from BOCES. So BOCES, they can't maintain a surplus. So what they do is at the end of when their books close, they look at it, all the different services that they offer, and any monies that are remaining, they have to give a proportional share back to the districts who bought into those services. And so it ranges anywhere for $250,000 to $400,000. It's a complete unknown to us because it's not our budget, it's theirs. They don't know until the summertime, and we usually get this in the fall, but that's where the lion's share of that money is. Last piece, I put some question marks on it. Interfund transfers. We do have what's called a debt service fund to help offset borrowings for capital projects. A question mark still out there is the RISE project. Because of the timing of New York State approving, or in this case, lack of approving the project at this point, we just don't know yet the delta, the change between having to borrow money and get building aid back on it. So we're working with our financial advisors from the Bernie Donegan's office to help us true up that number. They won't be able to give us that number until the project's actually been approved, then we can start to look forward to money's going out and borrowings occurring and money's coming in. So the whole point of the debt service fund is to do that. It's supposed to kind of be that bridge between paying out debt and getting building aid because there's a lag. And that's why schools maintain it. We just don't know if and how much we'll need to use of it. So total budget, just about $5.9 million from local service sources. The biggest pieces is really from interest income. You can see there it's about $550,000 more than one cash. And that is our revenue budget presentation. Obviously, it's not set in stone because the biggest piece out there, the governor's budget, is doesn't represent the aid we're necessarily going to receive. More will come once the state approves its final budget. Glad to answer any questions.
Anything from Mr. Martin? No.
So we're using seriously outdated, or the state's using seriously outdated poverty numbers.
Yes.
But they also use a 3-year average of free and reduced. Just in seeing that trend, have you seen increases in the free and reduced that would give us an idea of what that poverty gap might be over the course of 24 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's gone up. It's gone up at least 10 points since the 2000 census numbers. You know, we're trending now at about 33% free reduced numbers, about a third. That's how we were able to qualify under CEP because they lowered the CEP. The threshold used to be 40%. We weren't there, but they lowered it to 25%. We're right around that 33% mark for free reduced numbers. But 2000, we were more in the low to mid 20s at that point, so it's down about 10 points.
I was just curious if it was indicative. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had a question. You talked about the governor using an average CPI instead of what the formula calls for.
Yeah.
Do you know if the group that brought that has filed a motion that is in say violation or not in the spirit of what the what do I want to say settlement was?
I don't know if they've taken, I haven't heard necessarily if they've taken legal action, but I know that's been the complaint from everybody regarding the governor's numbers that it doesn't, you can't say on one hand that you've made foundation aid whole and then abandoned a major part of the formula which made it predictable.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just very,
Yeah.
how could that happen?
When do we expect to hear about the RISE project?
That's a great question. We actually have facilities planning the Tuesday after break, and I'm hoping to get one from CPI. I know they haven't, it hasn't been picked up yet by the state. But right now they're anticipating, best estimates is in April, getting approval done. That's where they're kind of basing on other districts in terms of where they are in the queue. You know, it's kind of like it's a big stack. You can think about grabbing the vanilla folder off the top, and so you kind of see where other people have filed there. So it is getting closer, but it's behind. You know, they were really anticipating in January getting approved, and now it's really, they're expecting almost a two-plus month lag from that.
Any other questions from Mr. Brennan? Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
Next is business. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Brennan, do we have any?
I think I've said enough.
We'll see about that.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Brennan's last update?
Just say something.
Next is instruction. Dr. Johnson.
Ms. Miga?
Yeah, no formal report, but I just wanted to recognize the staff at Briarwood School. Today we did an instructional walkthrough. Our leadership team went through and just were able to visit classrooms K through 3, intervention, and just, you know, such great relationships between the teachers and the students, and really high-level learning going on. Special shout out to the first graders who had some of their writing displayed from CQLA, our new curriculum on the wall, and I'm pretty sure their handwriting would best most adults, so it was very impressive. So just great learning and atmosphere going on at Briarwood. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Meyer? All right, thank you very much. Next is personnel, and the first item is personnel. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the personnel agenda dated February 15th, 2024, as recommended by the superintendent of schools, be approved as presented.
So moved. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. May I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Cornwall. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, sir. Ms. Kramer?
Thank you. So tonight for your approval, we have a retirement for an elementary teacher of 26 years of district service to our students, a change in employment status of a custodial assistant to custodian, the appointment of an elementary long-term substitute, 2 teaching assistants, a cleaner, an events coordinator, secretary to the principal, some at-will per diem substitutes of a contract substitute, a long-term substitute in mathematics, and a food service helper. We have 2 staff members recommended for tenure, assistant superintendent for instruction and a teaching assistant, and successful completion of professional learning hours for one of our teachers.
Any questions from Ms. Kramer? Seeing none, all those in favor? There's 7-0. Next is a first read of the spring coaching stipends. Dr. Johnson.
Ms. Kramer?
Yeah, so tonight for first read, we have the spring coaching stipends. I also want to add the addition of a fall coaching stipend for our head coach for varsity boys soccer is also included in this agenda.
Any questions for Ms. Kramer? All right, so that is a first read. Anything comes up, please reach out to Dr. Johnson. Next is a first read of the substitute revision. Dr. Johnson.
I'll turn it over to Ms. Kramer.
Yeah, so tonight we have a recommendation for a revision to our substitute teacher rates, in this case for our registered nurses, to add a line for former West Irondequoit employees that have retired as a nurse in the district for their hourly rate of pay.
Any questions on that? Again, this is a first read, so if anything comes up, please reach out to Dr. Johnson. That brings us to new business. First item is approval of the 2024-25 school year calendar. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the calendar for the 2024-2025 school year be approved as presented.
May I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Formal. May I have a second? Second by Ms. Vargas Cronin. Dr. Johnson.
Well, I first just want to thank the WITA for their partnership in working through different scenarios this year. It was a little more complex scenario than most years. Again, thanks to the collaboration, I'm excited to bring this to you. I think what most people are going to be most excited about is the 2 weeks break for the winter break. So, but I'll kind of run down through just so folks know what to expect. The feedback from staff, from faculty, has really been strong around the 2 conference days to start the year. So we're going to do that again this year. It gives us 1 day for formal introductions and a welcome back, some professional development, some different things like that, but also gives our faculty ample time in their buildings to work collaboratively, but also independently in preparing their learning space. So we're excited about that. We also incorporated a conference day on October 11th. That crosses over with conference day with BOCES. You can see in November, again, this is where we had some deep conversations with the WITA and some, was a recommendation that came back from our faculty. Last year, we piloted taking the K-4 conference day as customary and expanding that across K-12. And there was some great reviews from that and feedback. The faculty really appreciated the time to dive into their IST, PST processes, and then to also schedule some personal conferences with families as a part of that. Again, beyond grade 4. So that worked very well. But last year was in December. So this year, we talked about moving it to November, the week prior, the week of Thanksgiving. So we're going to have that. In looking across the region, there's a number of districts that are doing that, so aligned with a lot of other districts across the region. If you pop into January, again, new this year is the Lunar New Year, so that is the 29th. That's going to be a day, as you read, where 12-month staff will report, but 10-month staff will have a virtual day. So, and you can see at the bottom, it lists that there's a total of 187 faculty days, 180 student days, plus the conference days. We can, up to 4 of those count as instructional days for students. The 2 virtual days are important because we have a growing number of required annual professional development opportunities that they have to do around just a multitude of different topics. So last year we instituted a virtual day to kick off the year where staff completed those required trainings. And then this year we have to complete a 2-hour training across the board for child abuse. So they've incorporated more DEI, cultural responsive stuff into that. To be certified in New York State, we have to have that, but they're making everybody get recertified with that. So that virtual day in January, staff will be responsible for completing that. You see February break, and then I'll just point out in April again, taking that concept from November, we have the half day for K-4, which has been customary. That will be a K-12 half day, again, where we will engage people in the IST, PST, and the parent-teacher conferences. And then at the end of the year, you can see we have the 2 days at the end where the elementary, their last day will actually be the half day on the 25th. So that's working again with the WITA, just the time that they're required, especially when we think about some of these capital projects that will be starting over the summer and some of the moves and different things that happen, just making sure in the cleaning over the summer, making sure that they have time to do all that work while wrapping up the instructional year with all the grading assessments. So happy to answer any questions for you regarding that calendar, but that's what we came to. Josh?
Just a few questions. So you mentioned the November date, and I know that was like the second week of December before.
Correct.
For those parent-teacher conferences, and Wondering, are we gonna get as good of feedback or participation since it's before a holiday? People know that they can get out of town. And does it also give teachers 2 more weeks of data on students when it was the second week of December compared to the last week in November?
So we talked about all that. Ms. Miga and our principals and teacher leaders were instrumental in that, and we feel that it fits well around some of their assessments and tying up the quarter. And honestly, we're going to have to watch the attendance. I mean, we talked about that. We were going back and forth and consulting with the WITA. We're going to pilot it this year, and if we see the attendance impacted, then we'll reconsider that. But your point's valid, and those are part of the discussion.
Okay, and then just a clarification. The 2 virtual days, I see 1 virtual day on January 29th. Is there another virtual day that just didn't get colored in?
Yeah.
And I missed it, I'm sorry.
Well, I didn't explain it completely, so thanks for pointing that out. It's similar to what we did last year, where the staff, before the start of school, we had to find a date last year. They have to complete all of the required trainings on their own.
So sometime in August, we kind of say, hey,
Yes.
when they time in August, I'll just say August, that last week, August,
Yeah.
whatever. You have to complete this training.
And we're going to open them up as early as we can. That was a request from the staff, so in the summer they can work on these things on their own time, right? And get those done, and Ms. Kramer will set a deadline for that this year. They have to have them done by, again, in collaboration with them.
January virtual day, what do they do that day?
So there's a change in the requirements around our child abuse training, statewide. So they're going to have to do that. I think, was it April 24?
By April 2025.
25, yeah. So, sorry, next year's 20, this is 24, next year's 25.
I'm assuming this is a one-time thing there to get that done?
Right.
And that's because it's not out yet and it won't be out in August? Is that what we're thinking?
Well, they've described it. We don't know when they'll release that. In looking at the days, and honestly, we talked about bringing the 10-month staff in, and we looked across the region. We would be the only district that would bring them in that day.
That leads to my second question is, I thought the governor named it a school holiday. How can we ask staff to work on that day? Virtually, and if it's a school holiday, shouldn't the 12-month employees have off too?
So it's a holiday in terms of instruction, but we worked with our attorney on this, and through BOCES, we had the conversation, and they looked into this with their attorney. You can't have staff in that day. So again, looking at the 12-month staff, this really goes back to their contracts. And then considering the 10-month staff, this is where we get into the conversation and the partnership and working out the calendar for this year in preparation for making the recommendation to you.
And what are other districts doing?
Nobody's having a 10-month staff.
Are they doing virtual days, the training, or are they just saying you're not coming in?
We didn't talk about that with them. We made this decision. We talked about this with our youth. Because we know we have to do that training. So at some point, they're going to have to do that.
Okay. And we don't know what that training's like, an hour or 6 hours?
2 hours.
Okay, and then how many days do students need to go every year?
180.
So we have 180 student days. What's the plan if we were to have an event where we had to cancel school? Would we be worried about not making the minimum? I know we can, at certain events, you can apply to the state for a variance, you know what I mean? Like if there's an unforeseen just for your district, let's say a power outage, you know what I mean? But a weather event, I'm thinking let's say we get a big snowstorm, right, and it's 2 days. Is there a plan like, hey, we would take, and I'm just throwing, I don't know what it is, we would take days from April break? I just like to know that so families know that it's a possibility that if we were to have weather events where we dipped below 180 and we had to meet the minimum of that, at least people were aware if they were making plans that it is a possibility.
So the state allows up to 4 conference days to be counted towards the minutes of instruction. So there's actually 184 days of attendance there. 180 days where the students are actually in person, in session. The days in yellow that you see as conference days, those count as days of student attendance, as well as the full day in blue. That counts as a day of student attendance. So there's actually 184, which gives us, otherwise we wouldn't have done that, John.
Yeah, so I just was wondering about that
Absolutely
number.
consider that.
And if we had a big event, then.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a great question.
Interesting to see. Okay, thank you for
Yep.
answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the calendar? All right, all those in favor? That is 7-0 on this list. Next, under new business, is the acceptance of reserve analysis. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the 2023-24 reserves analysis as presented at the January 25th, 2024 workshop be accepted.
May I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Kiner. Seconded by Ms. Ford. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brennan, anything to add?
No, I mean, this and the next one were 2 of the activities we engaged in the January workshop. And just some feedback from our auditors in the past, although we did review them during the workshop, they recommended that the board take formal action at a session meeting, just indicating that they were reviewed. So that's what these 2 items are related to.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. Any questions on that?
Can we have I know it's in the January workshop, can we have those added to this one, so when we go back and look at it? So
Sure.
I'm thinking like, come in and say, did you do it in open session? There, Jenna can point to, here it is, and here's the document they reviewed. I went back and looked at it again, but it kind of buttoned it all up in that, thing that we talked about.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? 7-0 on this list. Next is acceptance of the financial forecast. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the 2024-2025 financial forecast as presented at the January 25th, 2024 workshop be accepted.
Moved by Mr. Connor, may I have a second, please? Seconded by Ms. Moore. Dr. Johnson.
Mr. Brennan, anything to add?
No, this was the other piece we continued with, just looking ahead multiple years to see impact of estimated expenditures and revenues over multiple years. Actually, an example of this, and we can add it, as suggested before, is under number 5 also, just in terms of what the forecast looks like for into the future. Sometimes we refer to it as a cliff to.
We do appreciate the cliff too. Any questions on that? All right, all those in favor? That is 7-0 on this list. Next is Universal Pre-K, request for proposals award. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the West Arundecoit Central School District award a pre-kindergarten contract to Sunshine Daycare Inc. for the 2024-2025 school year.
May I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Cornwell. May I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Vargas-Crum. Dr. Johnson.
First, just want to send some thanks to Ms. Miga for all of her legwork and solicitation, making sure that everybody was well informed about the RFP. She met with, actually she worked with Kelly Santora, who we should also thank for taking a really personal approach to this and making sure that everybody had the information that they needed to consider this fully. So thank you for that. With that, would you like to introduce this?
Sure, so this is an RFP award for a contract with Sunshine Daycare to hold at least one pre-K classroom for the 2024-25 school year. They are in the process and they have the desire to expand to 2 classrooms, but the 1 classroom space that they would utilize. They would have to go through the OFCS, Office of Family and Child Services approval, which any daycare center needs to. So obviously that would be, something that would be determined this spring. So it's for 1 to 2 classrooms for UPK. And as we discussed at our January workshop, we're also planning to continue 1 internal classroom as well. So obviously that's not part of this award because that would be a district held classroom, but we're excited to hold that for next year as well.
Any questions from us? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That is 7-0. Next is discussion and support of the 2024-25 budget envelope. Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the January workshop, and during that, we had a robust conversation that evening about all aspects budget. And at the end, it was pointed out that we didn't have a chance to go around the table and just confirm support for the envelope for this coming year. So I want to make sure that the board had an opportunity to do that. So, whatever the discussion may be, this is a time to have that. I know, again, it's been a little under a month since we were together that night, but you have the multi-year budget projection there. I'm going to turn it over to James if there's some things you want to point out specifically, but then whatever conversation you would like, this is an official vote, but just wanted, just check in and confirm support moving forward for the remainder of the planning. So, Mr. Brennan, anything specifically you would like to point out?
I guess the one piece, when we're talking about the envelope, we're really talking about the kind of one figure on that page, which is the $92,973,637. So that's kind of the base point for projections moving forwards, and that's, when we talk about in terms of what we've done in the past, in terms of establishing an envelope, that would be the box we are working within as we're developing the budget. Knowing that some of these numbers, particularly around state aid, and as we kind of talked about during the revenue budget, are likely to change. And then obviously as we populate data along the way, but that would be that's the box that we work within. Obviously as we provide budget updates along the way, we would have discussions about where we are relative to that box as well. So that usually we kind of true up everything once we get to that, once the budget from the state passes, then we have an opportunity to kind of look at the budget in totality, and we can always, we can kind of go back to this envelope, which was established at the budget workshop.
Any questions from Mr. Brennan specifically before we open up for discussion? All right, I'll open it up for discussion. James, on the revenue side, the amount we use from savings, looking at 24-25, is about $530,000. Does that include fund balance from the year before?
It would, yeah.
Okay.
I guess staying in the revenue side, what did we say, other ones?
Oh, yeah, so in this case, other is all those local sources. So that'd be things like, the biggest piece from that is county sales tax, about $4 million. The second largest really interest income, and then it kind of dials down from there. So kind of if you go back to the revenue presentation tonight, it's that last slide with all the mired of rows there. That's the other piece.
So Jim, I just have a couple questions on the
Sure.
revenue side. So I know you use the governor's budget, and historically, that number has risen by, can't count on it, but once they have a state budget. So can you just explain, let's just say state aid came in at 43 million instead of 42 million, right?
Sure.
Can you just explain how that would affect, it wouldn't affect our envelope, because that's what we're approving you to work into.
Right.
But can you just explain how the other categories would be affected?
Yeah,
Like, we wouldn't just not, would we drop the tax levy by the $1 million? And how does that affect our tax cap and then our ability to tax the following year? Because I know there's that 1 year exclusion on the tax that you can come back and get. You know, just so people understand that if the state aid were to rise for some reason
Yeah.
with the negotiations with the 3 groups in Albany, can you explain that to me?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So one, usually it typically most affects the use of savings. That's the most direct one in there. The other piece, it doesn't affect directly, but as we populate the budget, you know, with our expenditure side, you know, these are early estimates. We really don't know what fits there. So this would be a case of providing that data back to the board, really at future revenue presentations, looking at, I mean, there's a possibility our expenditures are more than the envelope, and that would be a piece of looking at we have more state aid that could possibly support that. That'd be another piece too. But usually it impacts the savings piece. We've always stayed within the envelope historically, and it's just as we got more aid, we reduced the amount of savings we drew upon.
Yeah, I'm just getting nervous because we're using such a small amount from savings.
Yeah.
Where it used to not, I mean, state aid would maybe go up from the negotiations, but it was always less than our savings, which helped us. But now we're getting to a point where we actually, if they just increased it $600,000, then what do we do with the $66,000 extra?
Right.
That's where, and we haven't been in this situation,
Right.
so it's one of the new questions to me, like, oh yeah, we just reduced our relying on savings, which is what we've always wanted to do, but I don't think we can just put more money in the savings.
Right.
So I'm just understanding how that works.
Listen, experience from my past is, you know, situations like that, as you're building the budget and your expenditures, you would have things almost like we do with capital plannings. There would be alternates, right? It could be one-time expenditures. There could be some needs around the district. And I think this would be a scenario where you may plan for that. There's others where, in the past, where we didn't have that aid, where we had to plan for that anyways, because it was volatile. But that would be another way. And I think that what I heard you mention, John, was also the consideration for the tax levy. And that would be another new consideration for us, right?
We did that 1 year.
We did it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of those would be options
So
on the table.
it could possibly, and I think we did this last year. We had, remember you brought us some proposals, we
Right.
increased the,
Yeah.
and I can't
Yes, we
remember the
did.
grant
Yeah.
funding, what the name of it was, but the classroom grants.
ESDL.
You remember we had a discussion around the table of those things, Justin, you were there, Rosa, and the board kind of gave some input, and gave direction. So we might see some of that again.
Those will all be options, yeah.
I think as John brought up 3 or 4 years ago, the budget was late, the state budget was late, and we got a large influx of money at the last minute. And it was really too late to change the expenditures budget at that point, so the board had voted to lower the tax levy for that year. But there's, every year's tax levy depends on the amount that was levied the year before, and there's a special 1-year provision. Can you explain that, James?
Yeah, there's in that formula that wasn't included tonight because it didn't apply, there is a provision to carry money over that you could have collected. We call it clawback, which I think sounds appropriate, but it is a carryover in terms of monies that you could have collected the previous year, you can bring it into the next year's budget. There's limitations in terms of how much you can do, and also timing. You kind of your kind of window to bring it forward, otherwise that money is kind of baked in your formula forever.
The only way you get it back is to go over the tax cap.
Yeah, so that's
With which you need the 60%.
which is a drawback of that formula.
Is it possible to take any money extra that comes into revenue to put it into more towards capital?
Yes.
Put it into our capital fund?
Yeah, that's a great point, 2 years, or last year, sorry, just last year we did that. We used some money, we seeded some money into the capital reserve for that. We also did some capital work. We paid for those, the improvements for the tutoring center at Pine Grove. Was one of those 1-year expenditure approvals in terms of just some minor capital work, but very important.
I know with the RISE project, we're using a lot, so trying to fill that capital budget again.
Is there an opportunity that if there was an influx of money that could raise we couldn't raise the envelope because the envelope's at what our tax cap is, right? The envelope is our tax cap. That's what we're allowed to raise by levy.
Oh, the levy, yeah.
But, yeah, I'm saying, so
Yeah, but our envelope is our expenditures, right?
Yeah.
So we would just
We
increase our.
could increase that, absolutely. We probably want to relook at, the recommendation would be to look at the projections again,
Right.
to see what
Right.
the 3-year impact of that could be, but that would be definitely something to consider with an influx of new.
it's just weird.
revenue.
It's almost like the graph is totally.
It's upside down, yeah.
Like, we never thought we'd get to this point. And I'm gonna make a statement. It's really bad. One thing, I'm disappointed in the governor, kind of changing the formula, and that was a surprise too. I know all the business directors, across the state and New York State School Board. That's an advocacy point that I think we need to continue to push with our elected officials. But the other thing is it's really frustrating to me that if a district is fiscally responsible and can come under the envelope and can give money back to the taxpayers, it actually is a detriment to the district because you should set it at that level and go forward, and then you were fiscally responsible, and you can, in the August, say, hey, we could lower the tax levy 0.5%, but it doesn't hurt you the next year. And that's really frustrating because I know the cabinet here strives to be fiscally responsible, but yet we can't, it's hard to reward that. Do you not agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, the point is that you're jeopardizing future years by trying to, by making that decision. Yeah.
But that's another point that we need to bring to our elected officials, that if they ever look at that formula, that really is a problem. Like we've talked about, make it 2%, James said, just give me a number and I'll work with it. It's hard when it fluctuates, and also, if you're fiscally responsible, you should be actually rewarded. That's why I look at it.
Yeah, we had, not necessarily on that second part, but the first part, around the governor's changes, all of our state delegation is very well aware,
I know.
based on the legislative breakfast feedback, so.
The group at Monroe County School Boards, the legislative committee has done a very good job at that, so thank you for leading that too. A big point in that, so. Just got my soapbox for the.
That's a good one.
Any other discussion, conversation, questions around this budget envelope? And then we'll do, it's not a formal vote, it's more of an informal straw poll, just so the administration knows that they have our support around this.
I may have missed this, but just quick question. So under revenues and looking at the savings, it seems like there's quite a large jump in savings from the 25-26 year to 26-27, and then again 27-28. Where is that stream of funds coming in?
So that's use of savings, so that you're under the revenue side. So we're basically, what we've done is with our projections, we're taking a conservative approach that state aid is not going to go up by very much. You can see we're using 1% numbers moving forwards. So there's going to be, if that holds true, there will be what's called a structural deficit in our budget, which means we won't be pulling in as many new revenues into the district as we're spending. And the way we're going to fill that gap is by relying more and more heavily on savings.
Okay.
So that's why you see that number jump from the 534 projection to 867, all the way up to $2.8 million. There's a breaking point that occurs on these out years in terms of, because it compounds over time.
That's referred to as the Clifford.
Gotcha.
It's less doomy than it has been.
Okay.
Just so you know, it's historical, so if you look at the chart on the right-hand side there, that is the savings. And that red line there, that is the savings level that James and Aaron have determined, and it's been pretty set. That is what I'll call it, allows us to have fiscal integrity in our district. That allows us not to do short-term borrowing during the summer to cover payrolls and stuff before we start getting our state aid. So there is districts that will go out and borrow money to make payroll till they get their state aid and then pay it back.
Okay.
That's a great point. The other number, that red line is good to look at for the revenue. The other piece to look at is, if you look right in the middle of the chart where it says percent of budget from savings, when that number gets approaching 5%, where then you're starting to tip the scales in terms of this is not a sustainable budget long term.
Okay.
The further you're away from that, you can sustain it, you can make cost controls and so on within, but then once you get we've done the studies, we lived it. Once you get about 5%, it really over multiple years. So you're good for that year, you're probably good for the year after that, but then when you start to gain 2-3 years further beyond that, then if the factors that are creating that to occur, either through spending or lack of revenue, don't change, you run out of money.
Thank you.
And then in the summer, I think we did the budget parameters, right, Dr. Johnson?
Yeah.
Where the board had talked, that it's, where we try to keep cuts away from the classroom, all those things, and then if we have surplus, these are the places we put them in order.
Right.
Those are, and in there is a statement that we try to use less than 5%, is it? We always try to use less than 5% from savings because of that diversion line that happens after that.
Yep.
And we used to have years that it would go like this, and we're lucky that we've been able to pull it back together.
Right. Like Sealy.
Yeah. I'll say, thank you for all the information, thank you for the time to comment. The workshop was great. I can support the $92,973,637 envelope for the cabinet to work and to present a budget to the board. I'll just make one comment, is I do worry that we're approaching a $100 million budget, and at what point can West Veronica support school budgets that continue to grow at that rate? It worries me. 15 years ago, it was $47 million was our budget. So there's my struggle, if it means anything.
Thank you, John.
I support it.
Thank you, Joseph.
I support it.
I support as well. Thank you to Aaron and James and Chrissy and Michelle for all the work that goes into that. We know, and as John said, the budget workshop was a great deep dive into where all these numbers come from, right? Because it's not just this spreadsheet. So we appreciate all the work that goes into that year round, but I know it's picking up into the busy season. So thank you. Does that give you what you need, Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, absolutely does. Thank you. Proceed with confidence.
Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. That moves us to consent agenda. May I have the recommended resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the West Irondequoit Central School District approves the consent agenda, which includes J2 through J13.
May I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Bay. May I have a second by Mrs. Warnable? So it's Super Bowl week. I'm going to ask for a little audible here. So I would like a motion to remove J3, revised, new, and retired policies, from the consent agenda. And I'll explain why in just a minute. There's some contradictory language that we need to resolve into the policies.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. May I have a second? Second by Mrs. Warnable. All those in favor of amending the consent agenda to remove J3? All right, that is 7-0, Mrs. Lustig. So the remaining consent agenda, which is J2 and then J4 through 13, is recommendations of the Committee on Special Education, surplus food service equipment, surplus classroom furniture, bid award custodial supplies, bid award health and safety supplies, bid award electricity supply, bid award food service equipment repair, maintenance, and installation. Bid award plumbing repair, maintenance, and installation. Bid award electrical repair, maintenance, and installation. Bid award lunch, paper, and plastics. Bid award electrical, plumbing, and building supplies. Are there any items remaining on the consent agenda which a board member would like removed for separate discussion? Are there any items which a board member would like removed to vote on separately? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended? Okay, that is 7-0, Mrs. Lustig. And I think now we need the separate resolution for J3 so we can amend it, right? Okay, may I have that recommendation, please?
Be it resolved that the revised policies 3273, 5740, 6160, 7470, 7530, 8110, 8210, 8320, and 8330 be approved as presented, and that policies 3120, 3130, 3412, 5150, 5330, 5591, 6460, and 8310 be retired.
May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Vegman, seconded by Mrs. Fornwall. I will turn it over to Dr. Johnson to discuss the discrepancy between these two policies, or you want me to do it?
I can absolutely dive in.
Okay.
So we started the conversation, I think at the last meeting, and it was around the language regarding the superintendent as spokesperson and the language as it exists, including the board president, and the difference between that and what has been proposed. So I'll start with an apology because I wrote you folks an update on Monday that I didn't send until yesterday. And in those short 3 days, I didn't tell Jenna. So Jenna handled it with grace today. Well, who doesn't love a great surprise? I didn't wrap it, but, so my apologies. But with that, and we actually talked a little bit about 3120 in our policy meeting today. We just have a lot of policies that are flying around right now because we're doing this review. So as a Board of Education, just want to bring that back to the table. And if you can open up policy 3120, right? And just take a look at that language, please. And what it says is the superintendent and/or the board president, Board of Education president, or their designee would offer official statements to the media. And so the conversation last meeting was the board president is not included in the proposed sample. And you would ask me to go back and ask Gary One, why did their recommendation change? So I did that, and what they shared was that that has always been their language. So at some point, and I would guess the last revision of this policy was 2016, there was probably a conversation where that was added here locally. And the question for you is, do you want to continue to include that or not? Because their language is the base language that was included with the update. So I bring that back to the table for discussion.
So can I ask a policy, procedure question? Jen, I hope I don't make this confusion. So right now on the table, we've moved policy 3130. Where are we? I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
So the revised or amended resolution is removing that we are adding new policy 3111 at this time.
And all the rest of it.
The rest,
We didn't vote on that yet.
correct.
Because I don't want to retire 3120 to settle
No.
3130 or 3111.
No.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
I want to just make sure that that's right. Because we did talk about retiring 3120.
Right, so good, that's correct. Good point.
Yes, so that needs to be removed from the
I think we need to make a motion to remove that.
Right.
Well, I think we can just settle 3111 and.
Okay, that's fine, if we're gonna do
and vote to
that.
approve it tonight. I mean, I'm not sure what other information I'm getting that you may need to make this decision. So, and honestly, whether it's this or that, we've operated for 7 years with the policy languages as it's been successfully, so it's really your preference.
So, I'm the one that brought this up, and thank you, Aaron, for the research. Why I believe that, and I agree that the superintendent is the spokesperson for the district. There could be times when the board president needs to make a statement. And I'm just, and one, and we had to do this, is when our budget went down. Because that is a board function that the board has to speak and can speak to the media about. Because the board's responsibility is to present a budget to the voters, okay? And at that point, if we had an issue, the board president, in consultation with the superintendent very closely, would either make that statement or together they would make that statement. And the second one, which will never be a problem here, but I think we need the backstop because we've seen it in other districts. If there ever is a problem with the office of the superintendent, that the board president can speak. And those are the two things. So my thing would be, I would like to amend 3111.
Yep.
And I gotta go back to it because I got a couple screens open here. Just give me 1 second, please.
Can I help with that, John?
No, I got them up here.
Thanks, James.
I'm used to 2 screens at work, so I'm sorry about this. So I would like to just amend the language in there under
So last paragraph.
the last paragraph of school district media, that as official spokesman of, official spokesperson, the superintendent and/or board president or designee will issue all news releases concerning the district. And the superintendents lead first because they are 99.9% of the time are going to be doing that.
Great.
Discussion on that.
I agree.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Works for you?
It's your policy.
Lovely. Do we?
So
Okay.
yes.
So procedurally, Mrs. Lustig.
So I think that we need to vote on the motion that's on the table that
Which is
does not include
everything but
3111.
3111.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's already on the table.
Okay. You have a question or?
And then we need a new motion
Well,
for
so
3111.
That motion for 3111 is, my question is, we're going to motion 3111 to the language that's discussed. And do we have to have a second reading on it, or are we going to waive the second reading and we're going to approve it tonight?
Well, I think you've had
Because I
two
don't want to,
readings.
I don't want to retire 3120 until 3111 is in place.
I think you just had your second read.
I
We made
agree,
the
I
changes.
agree, Aaron. I agree with you 100%. I just want to make sure that,
And now we've
so we should do 3111 first, right, Jenna?
Sure. No,
Well,
I mean, this
You're the
is, there's
board
already a
clerk, so-
motion on the
Yeah,
table.
we have to clear the
We have to
motion off the
vote
table first.
on
Okay.
all of the other policies.
Okay, I'm good.
Are you comfortable just doing them sequentially?
That's fine.
Okay.
I think you guys have heard my concern.
Yes.
It doesn't go that way.
That'll be a whole, that'll make a very long night.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I believe that.
They just trust you.
You understand, it's about the process, okay?
Understood.
Sorry.
Okay. So the motion on the table is all of the policies except for 3111. All those in favor? That is 7-0, Ms. Lustig. May I have a recommended action on 3111?
Be it resolved that the new policy 3111 be approved with the addition of language to include the board president.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Seconded by Mrs. Borneval. Any additional discussion, questions, or comments on this?
Just want to, Aaron, thank you for the time to work through this, thank you for the research, Jenna. I know this is kind of free balling it right here.
We're
I
learning.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amended 3111, That is 7-0, Mrs. Lustig. That concludes the consent agenda. Thank you, everyone, for working with us on that. That brings us, yes, multiple copies. That brings us to board liaison reports. We will start with the legislative committee with Mr. Sullivan and myself. The highlight was last weekend we had our legislative breakfast. We've had bits and pieces of that trickle out already. I just want to say thank you to all of the members, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Brennan, who were able to attend. I really want to highlight the student voice that was new this year. So we had 5 students from area districts, including one from West Irondequoit, Tejan, and they presented to our legislators. And honestly, it was spectacular. They crushed it. Tejan pinched hit for us with like 2 days notice because our original student was unable to attend, and he, jumped in there like he had been part of the process the entire time. So excellent work. Thank you, Mrs. Miga, for your coordination on that, Dr. Johnson, and making that happen. And anybody who's there, after I finish, I'll just open it up to anybody who wants to report. I sat with Assemblymember Clark for both sessions. As a table leader, we had great discussions around foundation aid and any potential changes to that, which there's some things percolating, but she wasn't aware of anything that had traction yet. To answer John's question from earlier, there is a petition on the Alliance for Quality Education's website around the governor's changes. There was a conversation about the community eligibility program, electric bus mandates that are coming down the pipeline, mental health funding, the capital outlay exclusion project, and one bit of news to update is that Assemblymember Clark now sits on the education committee, which is very beneficial for those of us that advocate for education, being our local representative. And she had reached out to Dr. Johnson prior to the breakfast to gather data around how the changes to foundation aid were impacting us. So she's definitely doing her research. And then we also met this last week, Wednesday, just a prep for, it was 2 weeks ago, they all blend together, a prep for the Albany trip, which is March 4th. Anybody else who's at the breakfast, anything that you want to add? Okay. Next is labor relations with Mr. Vey and myself.
Yes, we had a meeting on yesterday, Wednesday, and the topic was workplace violence, which I think is what we talked about for that. So they kind of outlined that, and they went through some of the requirements and how districts are going to meet that. Matt, you were there leading it, so I joined virtually, but it was a good discussion, some good questions from the audience, I'll say, that made me think like, wow, I didn't even think of that kind of thing. So that's what's nice about labor. Any of these committees we go to, people look at it from different lenses. So it's sharpened. With areas, it's sharpened as the saw, right?
Yeah, it's a state law that's existed for a while, but it's new for school districts, and it's being phased in right now. We had to pass the policy by February 1st, I think, we did it on February 1st. We did it last meeting. There's still many things from the state level, unanswered questions on how all of these pieces interplay with things we already have around safety and security, around workers' compensation, around all these other pieces. And so there's a lot of questions, not as many answers at the presentation. I happened to walk out with Ms. Kramer, and I was like, we're just going to ask Michelle to handle any questions that come up. But yeah, lots of, and it was presented by Farrar Fiorenza, so they have a good working knowledge of this, and I'm sure they'll be able to support us as this moves forward. Next was information exchange with Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Vargas Cronin, and myself.
Our last meeting was last Wednesday. Interesting presentation on the Monroe County Eco Park and how school districts could potentially better take advantage of their services for disposal of common hazardous materials like lab materials or the medical materials that you may see in nursing offices.
Yeah. Only thing I'll add is that They highlighted that 2/3 of all vapes at the Eco Park come from school districts. So there's a cost to disposing of those. If they're confiscated at school, we have to pay to get rid of them. And they also highlighted that donations can cost districts money to get rid of things. So, you know, we all accepted willingly hand sanitizer at the beginning of the pandemic. Now many districts are paying several dollars a gallon to dispose of that same, as it was affectionately referred to as Cuomo juice. But there's a real cost, and that's why, you know, donations do get approved by the board, because it could end up costing us money if we have to dispose of those things in the future. Next is Helmer with Mr. Connor and Mr. Bay.
Okay. We met this past Tuesday. They did a recap of past events that have happened over the last weeks to months, including the Trees for Trails and the Trivia Night, which was very successful. They had a lot more teams this year than they've had in the last couple of years, so it's growing again. They highlighted some upcoming events, including the Maple Sugaring Tours and the Pancake Breakfast. And much of the discussion was around the upcoming solar eclipse celebrations and festivities that we're going to have there at the Nature Center on April 8th.
Yeah, I'm saying, you know, the Nature Center staff has done a wonderful job, not only doing the programs that we've all come accustomed to, the maple sugaring, the Trees for Trails. Thank Mr. Long for the 500 trees that he dragged up there. We heard about Aaron not having to go to the gym that day, carrying 2 trees at one time, kind of working out. But they have really spent a lot of time on the solar eclipse, and you know we've been designated as one of the watching spots, and they really put a lot of heart and soul into it.
And it's really impressive, the planning that they...
Yeah, the planning, like they showed the planning, and I was like, I wouldn't, like, some of the stuff they were working on, I was like, I would never thought of that, you know what I mean? Like, so there's gonna be a watch area there, they're have it all planned out, they're trying to have some food vendors come. It's really an all afternoon, like 1 to 5, I think it is. There'll be transportation from the Medley Center to up there. They'll have some on-site handicap parking if it's needed. They have the glasses. I would remind people, if you're not gonna even go to that one, they do have glasses that are available. They're, James helped me out, they're certified, or they're ISO certified for the solar eclipse. The donation is $2. You can stop down at the Nature Center at any time and pick those up, because you'll need those to view the eclipse. And it's gonna be an exciting time and they're gonna plan to shut down like 10 minutes before the eclipse starts, so really everybody can have time to enjoy just that event. So it's gonna be exciting.
I think it's great to see what the education community has done around the eclipse. I mean, Matt and I went to an information exchange meeting last February where the museum was beginning to talk about what they were doing for the eclipse. And there was a follow-up earlier this year for information exchange as well. It truly is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for most people. And having been through one before, it's great to see the excitement and the learning opportunities that are being created out of this. And I'm thrilled that Helmer is playing such a big role in it.
Yeah, super exciting. Next is PTSA with Ms. Orr and Ms. Formal.
We met last Tuesday. This week, Tuesday, excuse me. And talked about several things, one of which were the school supply kits. All of the schools want to move forward with that. And at this point, they are currently looking at the lists as grade levels to make sure that they are consistent across district. The Honorary Life Award is the highest PTA honor, and applications for that will be opening soon. They're also looking at school picture bids. They're looking at Clicks, Upstate, and Life Touch, and they're hoping to review that, and we'll have a decision next month at the PTSA meeting. I guess this hasn't been done a real investigative with these groups in a while, so they felt it was time. There's many open positions, and membership being one of them, and due to that, membership is down for PTSA this year. And because of that, they have decided that this year they will not be giving out the STEAM scholarships to students. They are going to hold off this year and hopefully be able to offer it in the future. Let's see, fundraising, they're hoping to do the Next to New sale, and finding dates for the community to donate their items. So save those items that you might want to be getting rid of in your basement or wherever. And then National Bike to School Day is May 17th. And I know some schools participated, but kind of on their own last year. And the PTSA is hoping to kind of make it a district-wide event. Maybe not on the 17th, but something that we can do as a district and maybe tie it to bike safety curriculum that is done at some of the buildings. Anything to add? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good.
Next is the West Irondequoit Foundation. Mr. Connor, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, we continued reviewing and editing our operating manual. There's discussion about the possibility of trying to get a plaque put outside of the new sensory room when that gets done, as well as maybe a banner in the fitness center, just kind of honoring the amount of money that the foundation has donated for those particular rooms. And we watched the grant video for the archery equipment grant. That's about it. Anything else?
Props to Dave Connor for being the student representative that presented the archery video. I thought that was great. It's been really interesting. Let me change that. The operations manual updates have not been really interesting. They've been a pretty tedious process.
Yes.
But you know, there is a new head of the foundation this year, and there's been a lot of conversation around how they can broaden their impact in ways that they can think about, you know, maybe beyond just the grant processes, ways that they can consider having broader impacts on students. And there's been some interesting conversations. You know, I think there's, you know, probably some mindsets in there that need to be changed, but it's nice to see them being a little bit more open-minded about some ways that they may have to bring in broader support to the district. It was fun to listen to those conversations. I'm not going to steal their thunder. I won't get specific in the things that they talked about, but there's definitely conversations on broadening the impact, which is great to see.
Thank you. Next is the Teacher Learning Center with Mr. Sullivan.
Next meeting is end of
The 29th.
29th,
Yeah.
end of this month.
Yeah, that, the last one was canceled,
Yeah.
so.
So we'll have an update in our next business meeting.
And next is facilities with myself and Ms. Vargas Crum. And we have not met since our last report out, but we do have a meeting the week after break.
Yep.
And then the last committee is Health and Safety with Ms. Morneval and Ms. Vargas Crum.
So Health and Safety met December 5th, and then our next meeting is March 5th. So no new report since December.
Excellent. That brings us to schools. IHS, Mr. Veda, did the students leave you anything this time?
So, yeah, you know, it's hard to follow. I can tell you that Regents Week went well, and then there's all the activities that happened at the high school. We heard about them today. The choir groups going around and saying, and just the atmosphere at the high school is uplifting, let's call it. So, there's great stuff happening there.
Next is Dave.
Mr. Bajardi sent me an email with some things to share. This Friday, I'm thinking this is tomorrow, everyone that has received a positive referral during the first half of the year will be treated to a PTSA sponsored celebration. And they've been awarded this because they exemplify one of the school's 4 community values. And it'll be donuts and breakfast pizza. And it's making 35 Dakers very happy, so that's awesome. And then every morning during the month of February, Black heroes and heroines are being celebrated on the Dake Morning Show. Students are reading mini bios of lesser known influencers such as Barry Gordy, Allison Felix, and Mary Van Britton Brown. And then last week, the Mosaics Club welcomed IHS leaders from the Black Student Union and Mosaics to help students have meaningful discussions around the power of words, which is what you talked about, Dr. Johnson. So, great things happening at Dake.
Awesome. Mr. Sullivan, Rogers.
Very exciting to share my first update from Mr. DiMartino. Lots of exciting things going on at Rogers right now. They had grade level assemblies to celebrate student success and incorporate student voice in school-wide expectations around upstanding and using helpful and kind language. The new gym floor is really a highlight there, and they had an assembly for that was kicked off with a dunk by former Rogers student Eric Barr Jr. So that had to be pretty exciting to watch. Student achievements around friendship, diversity, and academics were also highlights of that assembly. For Black History Month, they start each day with music from Black artists. Miss Hamilton reads a biography and shares historical and cultural background around each artist and celebrates their contributions. And this evening at 6:30, the Sankofa West African Drum and Dance Ensemble was at Rogers for an event. Wheels touched down for the inaugural Rogers Coffee Squad tour. So what we saw from Dake in our study session, they're kicking that off in Rogers. It will begin this Friday. The coffee cart will focus on life skills for students in Miss Swisher's 1214 program. And teaching assistants Meredith Wood and Joan Shopful have led the charge and activated student voice and input to spread appreciation around the school. Book fairs and Uplift Irondequoit Bingo Night coming in the month of March. PTSA and Rogers team have several fun nights across grade levels in the month of April. And teachers at Rogers are amazing. And the data around reading growth shows tremendous work by teachers and students. And once I'm a little bit more mobile, I'll be meeting with Mr. Martino and doing another walkthrough in Rogers, and then identifying the school-based planning and faculty meetings that I'll be attending.
So I just add something for Rogers.
Go for it.
Is that good? I had the pleasure to help when Nick came over. He did a pancake with the principals. Aaron stopped by, and I just wanted to tell the board is, I helped cook the pancakes outside, but I witnessed something that we talk around the board table that I thought was important to share. Is, we went through the security audit. We had Chris Scheller come in and the consultant, and really standing outside, helping cook. I witnessed that the 3 touch points we talked about with staff, meeting families and students coming in, and really, we talk about it around the table, but just to sit back, like I was in the background, to see it, and I mentioned to Aaron when he came, it was really amazing, the engagement and those 3 to 4 touch points. There was more people inside. I'm just talking before they got to the door. And it was really nice to see that. And I know it happens in other spots in the district, Aaron, but to actually see something that we talk about here at the board, and then as you guys, the cabinet, go around the district, you get to see that. But for me as a board member, to see that, it was really rewarding to see our staff really embracing that program, and the feedback from the students. The engagement was really, really neat, Aaron. So I wanted to mention that. I'm sure all the schools are doing, but just to see it from, I'll say, the shadows was really impressive.
Listwood's a great example of that. When I was driving my daughter to work for a while there, you can see the kids' faces, just the excitement of, it's one of the lunch monitors that does a lot of the greeting outside of Listwood, and he actually even opens the door of the car, and the kids get out, and they're so excited to see him. And it really is, to see that in action, and even at the high school, dropping off the boys, just there's so many people out there, it's great to see that in practice. The kids really respond to it.
And really, get that to, I think, Chris, you know what I mean, because he's spearheading that. It's probably something that he doesn't hear a lot of, but I was pretty proud.
Thank you. Next is Iroquois, Ms. Cornwall.
Mr. Swain and I connected. So over the last couple weeks, the instructional teams have met. They met together with the intervention teams to review mid-year data, monitor progress towards meeting their targets, and then making adjustments to instruction and intervention plans accordingly. One of the things they were really excited about was partnering up with Rogers for a couple of paired Black History Month celebrations that they're doing, and the learning events that was organized by the Humanities TOSA Claire Hamilton. And then their PTSA team held a fourth grade social event a couple weeks ago. It was a bingo night. It was really well attended. It included just lots of fun and activities for students and families, so we were really happy about that. So things are going good at the airport.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Briarwood Colebrook, Ms. Waterstein.
Yes, Dr. Farrell reports that at Colebrook, students and staff are engaged in Colebrook Post Office project, where students write letters to teachers and students with a message of kindness. The kindergartners are responsible for sorting and delivering the mail across the building. So it's a really nice project for everybody to have like a great way to enhance literacy skills and very inclusive for all students and really enhancing their letter writing skills. At Briarwood, the third grade students have been working on writing code for Ozobots. They started with writing code on paper, using markers, and now they're moving on to writing code on the computers. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to next month going to one of the kindergarten orientations. Looking forward to that.
Awesome, thank you. Brookview Seneca, Mr. Conlon.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get out there probably in March to actually do a walkthrough of Brookview, because that's actually one school I don't think I've ever set foot in. My kids went to Seneca, so I know all about Seneca, but I'd love to get over to Brookview and see that school. The children celebrated the 100th day of school at both Brookview and Seneca. Students and even some staff across both buildings dressed up as 100-year-olds and engaged in different 100-day of school activities. This was followed up by one of the busiest days at K-3, Valentine's Day.
Awesome, thank you. And last is Listwood Southlawn with myself. I was able to do a walkthrough of Southlawn with Ms. Pavone towards the end of January. Really the highlight of that was the level of student relationships that she's built. Every single classroom we walked into, there was a line of students who wanted to give her a hug. And you know, she checked in with all of them, and it was really great. I have two nieces that attend Southlawn, so I got to surprise them at school. That was also fun as well. And then on the way out, I ran into Mr. Conti, who showed me the new Rogers Gym floor that Mr. Sullivan just told us about, and it was really, really nice. Just the logo and how everything came together, excellent work on that, so super exciting to see that ready to go. And then Ms. Pavone also gave me an update. Intervention reviews have been going well in both buildings. We continue to celebrate student growth. Tutoring has also started up and will have great impact on students that are receiving it. Both Listwood and Southlawn third grade went to the RPO. It was a great experience for all the students. All of the opportunities for field trips are so beneficial. Being able to go to Helmer and Helmer come to classroom visits is also so wonderful. Listwood's second grade play was a great success. Both classrooms had a lot of fun, and it was great to see all the families come in. On my own Facebook the other day, I saw memories of the second grade play with my own son with the second grade top up. So I think there's about a duck and a quack and something.
Quack.
Yeah, it's a good play. It's a good show. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil the ending. Next is future meetings. Well, we have future meetings, Mrs. Lustig.
Yes, we have the grades 9 through 12 study session on March 7th at 6 p.m. at the high school. We have the prospective candidate information session on March 21st at 5 p.m. here at district office, followed by the audit committee and then business meeting. And then we have a study session on April 11th at 7 p.m. Here at district office.
Thank you very much. And I did look, Dr. Johnson, that memo you sent out, the Oak View on April 11th at 6 p.m.
Thanks.
Yep.
11.
Yep.
Thank you.
On the 11th?
April 11th, yep.
Yep.
Yep. Next is executive session. Is there a reason to go into executive session tonight?
Yes, there is, to discuss the employment history of a particular person or persons.
Then may I have a motion to move into executive session? Thank you, Ms. Bornable. Seconded by Mr. Sullivan. All those in favor? That is 7-0, Mrs. Lustig. We will adjourn into executive session. Thank you, everyone, very much for a very productive day.